Welcome to this episode of SAM Conversations. This is a time when the coronavirus challenge has acquired global dimensions, and we in India are trying very hard to manage the situation. Prime Minister Modi has taken some very resolute decisions, and we are currently in the middle of the 21-day clampdown. In recent days, the Ministry of Defense has reached out to the ex-servicemen. They have encouraged districts and states to identify volunteers amongst the ex-servicemen and create small clusters wherever it is feasible. And in some states, district collectors have already begun this exercise. Punjab, which has a very, very rich and experienced ecosystem of ex-servicemen, a gene pool, has already made a start. They have created some volunteer groups. I gather so have other states like Andhra and perhaps Kerala and so on. So just to get a better sense about what ex-servicemen can do as one group and what the armed forces can also possibly do if there is a need and the civilian administration invokes what is called as the provision of aid to civil power, which is there in the Constitution. We thought it would be useful to try and get a domain expert to talk to us about what has been done in the past and what are the kind of policy strands that we might bring into the public domain today. I have great pleasure in welcoming and introducing Brigadier Ramanjit Singh Ahluwalia, an army veteran, a very distinguished gunner from the Regiment of Artillery. And I must make a full disclosure here, a caveat if you will, that Ramanjit and I joined the NDA together in the summer of 1966, which is a long time ago. Since then, he has had a very rich professional career where he has been involved in aid to civil power from a fairly early stage. If I recollect right, Ramanjit, welcome to the show, and please correct me if I'm not getting it right. But as a young captain, you were an MO in Military Ops Directorate in Army Headquarters, looking after some issues related to Assam and the Northeast. Over the years, as he moved up in the service, he has been involved, again, as I said, hands-on at the drafting stage when the government of India was working on the NDMA, the National Disaster Management Act was being drafted and passed. Ramanjit Ahluwalia was there as a colonel and a brigadier in the IDS headquarters. He was involved in the tsunami relief, involved in J&K, various other national calamities when they occurred. He's also been involved in the United Nations as a matter of interest. He has undergone professional courses under UNAGs, and he's also one of the experts as far as the Asia-Pacific region is concerned for such disaster relief and humanitarian aid. Brigadier Ahluwalia, welcome to this particular episode of SAM Conversations. Can I request you just to give us the current rules of business when it comes to the armed forces and aid to civil power, and then we will talk about what the ex-servicemen can do. Raman, all yours.
Thank you, Uday Bhaskar. A pleasure to be with you always. Now, to answer your specific query, the armed forces can be requisitioned by the civil administration for any specific task. So the control remains with the civil administration. The armed forces chip in for the specific task that has been assigned by the civil administration. Execution of the task is the discretion of the armed forces. They cannot be monitored on how to execute it. So the method is then with the armed forces. The mission or the task is assigned by the civil administration. Having accomplished the task, the armed forces report back to the civil administration and hand over the situation for them to take it forward.
Now tell me, in the current situation where we are in 2020, with the act having been passed by Parliament, Does Delhi, the central government, and the Ministry of Defense have to be involved each time? Or can this be done at the local level, at the level of state governments and districts? What is the current rule position?
The rule position is that the central government need not come in every time. Once in principle approval can be given by the central government so that everyone is on board in the same manner. Thereafter, it can be done locally. However, it must be remembered that the armed forces is the instrument of the last resort for our country and not the first. Many junior level administrators find it very convenient to requisition the armed forces and hand over the situation to the army to achieve the desired results. This is most undesirable. When we talk of civil resources, the civil administration must make sure all resources at their command have been fully utilized. After that, the police forces, then come the central armed police forces. And if the situation is still not in control, then the armed forces can be requisitioned. But it must be remembered, there is nothing after the armed forces.
No, true. I think this is a fair point, and I think that whenever we have had deliberations about internal security and the way in which the state responds, it has been, I think, noted and identified that state governments are encouraged to first utilize local resources and then move up the grid and go to the armed forces as the very last resort. But let me change gear and come to the current challenge that India is facing, which is the coronavirus. And we are aware that the armed forces have already been identified. And if you recall, the first quarantine facilities were set up under the aegis of the Army Medical Corps, which is our doctors and nurses. And if I remember right, Manesar and some place in Punjab and Rajasthan were the first. And now I think other commands have also chipped in. And for instance, the Navy in Visakhapatnam has created one, so has the Air Force. So quarantine facilities, I think the Army is doing its bit. But where the need for more capacity would possibly be in the post 21-day phase, meaning that the coronavirus has created such severe disruption that at every district level, there may be a need for capacity depending on the nature of the problem. For instance, there are some hotspots now. Kerala is a good state, is a good example of a state where suddenly there's been a spike because of various local reasons. So my query to you is that now that the MOD, the Department of Ex-Servicemen, has reached out to the veterans, what are the areas and how should the veterans be organized? Maybe you could help us to understand that based on your earlier experience.
2 points. Firstly, when we talk of armed forces, ex-servicemen or the veterans are not a part of the armed forces. When we talk of armed forces, it is people in uniform who are serving. So the ex-serviceman is a separate category altogether. One. Second, the ex-servicemen have no resources at their command whatsoever. Third, they are a fragmented lot. So we need to identify what kind of role and by whom that role can be played among the ex-servicemen.
So that having been said, I would sort of make this point that since the government now is looking for capacity across the board, this is not just confined to ex-servicemen. Today, I think there is a fairly rich retired gene pool of people who have retired from different parts. They could have retired from the government at the center, from the state government, from the private sector, from academic institutions, other professionals. My sense, again, I'm saying this more as a security analyst, is that looking at the scale of the challenge, because we are now talking not only about containing the coronavirus and managing it, prevent, for instance, community transmission, but also helping to revive whatever be the rhythms of economic activity in India, trade, etc., and the unorganized sector, which have been badly hit. So I would make the case that perhaps, given the fact that now that India is reasonably well computerized, that the Zilla Sainik Board can be the starting point to identify those ex-servicemen who are, first of all, able. They have to be healthy, and they have to be able to volunteer willingly. And then once you have that data of names or database of names, you should be able to identify skill sets, meaning it's possible that we will have a large number of people who were medical practitioners, either doctors, nurses, or paramedics, both civilian and armed forces and from other parts of the government, and maybe a few ex-servicemen who have managerial experience. Someone like you, for instance. You have been part of the Government of India effort in J&K. You were there in the tsunami, 2004, when you were in the IDS headquarters. So would it be fair to say that if we talk about one specific takeaway from today's discussion, that Zilla Sainik boards and ex-servicemen groups should be encouraged to create databases and create boxes as to health, volunteer, skill set, etc., and that this could be a starting point? Raman?
A good point. However, two things we need to remember. As far as the medical forces are concerned, the Zilla Sainik Board has the data of who all retired from the armed medical corps. So they can be identified easily. However, the Zilla Sainik Board has no data about the profile of other officers. So I would suggest that a message be sent across pan-India, seeking volunteers for specific tasks. For example, if I have been there in planning and organizing at the national level, I am a volunteer to be a part of any organization, whether it be with the PMO or in the MHA, where this kind of planning is being done. And I can share my experiences on ground of the practical things that can be done to improve. For example, we formulated a policy, very rightly, the PM took the initiative and enforced a clampdown. However, having announced a clampdown, the execution part, that is where the expertise of the armed forces people can come. A few points towards this. We need to send a clear message: no congregation of men for any religious purposes. Irrespective of your religion, there cannot be a congregation for celebration of religious festivities at this time. Now, this message has to go loud and clear, particularly to the rural areas. We must understand the rural fabric of the country. People in villages congregate together for bhajan, kirtan, praying to God to mitigate their miseries. And for Corona, this is the worst thing you can do. Therefore, we have to explain to all concerned that you are not to congregate in the evenings, stay put in your homes, and maintain social distancing, which is the only method to ensure that Corona does not spread. There is no community transmission of the disease. So that is one major thing we need to do.
I'm saying, if I could take this forward again, since we are thinking aloud, that perhaps what would be appropriate is that, for instance, we are aware that Punjab has already taken certain steps in terms of how the ex-servicemen are contributing. My own reading is that it needs a little bit of application of mind so that every district, every Zilla can come up with its own template about how they can utilize the experience and the capacity that the ex-servicemen as a group. And here I want to repeat, when we talk about the retired community, that the bandwidth should be increased to include not just the Faujis, but also the Central Armed Police, the local police, those who may have retired from government across the board. Because the government of India at center and state level has a lot of depth in dealing with large congregations. The example I often give is the Kumbh Mela, where I'm sure those who have attended, the scale is staggering. Anything between 25 to 30 million people at peak time are there. And they organize it like a friendly camp. And I went there just to see you're an operation logistic guy, Ramanjit. You will, see the scale. They create bathrooms, kitchens, and so on. So this is what I keep saying, that there is capacity in India. We need to build on that. Ramanjit?
Uday, a very good example. But again, it just so happens that when the Mahakumbh, which occurs once in 144 years, took place in Allahabad, I was the brigade commander of the artillery brigade in Allahabad.
My God, Ramanjit, you and I think we are closely involved.
Which was this operation? I have been very intimately involved, and we set up a camp there. Of course, for the Kumbh Mela, the civil administration did a marvelous job.
Yeah, I remember meeting them. They were great.
At all. The services were not touched, whether it was for bridges, tracks, logistics, everything. They had a special commissioner for the Kumbh Mela who did a marvelous
meeting him. Yeah.
So their capacity is phenomenal. Now, coming back to the point that we were discussing about the ex-servicemen, unlike most of the civil government eminent people who have worked at the top level, in the armed forces, we have a fair number of senior people who have settled in villages, in small towns. Now the civil, and most of them are looked upon with awe. So the civil administration must optimize these persons, and they are well aware of them, to galvanize the masses, and along with the local leaders, starting from Sarpanch, district level, MLAs, all the political leaders must lead from the front. They must co-opt the eminent ex-servicemen to convince the people that to congregate and pray is not the solution for Corona.
No, I think this is a very good point.
Together, it becomes a very potent force to influence the masses.
I think, Ramanjit, what I will do is to request you, since you have had so much experience in this particular domain, that perhaps we can reach out to our own colleagues and those who have experience with what Punjab is doing just now, because Punjab also has a very high density of ex-servicemen, and see if there are any best practices that could be brought onto a platform like South Asia Monitor. And in turn, reach out to a state like Kerala. I hope those who are watching this particular episode can share their experiences in Kerala. And you're going to become a Sherpa, Ramanjit. You have not realized it, but you have just volunteered. So we are going to pick your brain, as it were, for this exercise. But I want to change gears to one more subject in the time available, which is, the women of the armed forces, meaning that when we talk about the effort and the contribution that Fauji wives, Fauji families, whether you're a wife or a daughter, a mother, I think they have played a very valuable role, a silent role, and you in the army are familiar with your experience. The other two services, Air Force, Navy, have their own way of dealing with this. I felt that perhaps, and I'm underlining the word perhaps, that some of our more qualified, experienced women who belong to the larger fraternity of the Fauj could also be encouraged, because there are many women today who have been very, very, I would say, seriously affected by the Corona sort of challenge the disruption, and especially the migrant workers and the disorganized sector, the unorganized sector. So I thought that maybe you could also share your thoughts about how women, for instance, army wives and even the retired members of this organization could perhaps make a suggestion to their district level as to what they can do, because there are some problems which are gender specific. Raman?
A very good point, Uday, again. Now, I don't know how, but it just so happens that I am one of the few officers who has commanded a pure South Indian unit.
I have to stop you here and say, Ramanjit, is there anything you have not done which is so distinctive? But please go ahead. Yeah.
So, in my unit, the junior most person has also retired. Every year, on the second Sunday of the month of May, we get together in one of the southern towns where all the men congregate and we have a lunch together. I fly in from Delhi, have lunch with the boys, and fly back at night. Now, coming to Kerala, we have a very strong body in Kerala. People who retired as Subadar majors, Subadars, very influential people, doing very well post-retirement, including Havaldars, very well settled. There are people who are dealing in condiments. There are people who are dealing in medical stores. Name it and they are in it. Now, all these people, they have networking and they have a good say in the villages. This is one source that can be very effectively tapped in Kerala to ensure that people at the lower level understand distancing and staying away. Physical distance maintenance is mandatory. So they can play a very effective role in Kerala for this, Kerala and Tamil Nadu.
So this is a great idea. As I said, I hope that we can, take this forward. What I will do again, Ramanjit, I'm going to sort of use your profile to reach out to the entire community of ex-servicemen, those who are Army, Navy, Air Force who know you, and those who are either associated with the NDA course that we both belong to, or the entire, I would say, constituency of ex-servicemen and individual states, that without, shall we say, disrupting existing initiatives that are being done by the center, state governments, and district administration, that perhaps they could reach out in their own way. I'm repeating that South Asia Monitor can be an aggregator of suggestions, ideas. Prime Minister Modi himself has encouraged both state governments and citizens to give their suggestions to deal with the problem. Because I'll close on this, Ramanjit, just to say that my own area of work has been that of a security analyst. And I believe that India is going to have a very complex internal security challenge in the months ahead, particularly in relation to those who have been completely jolted. We are talking about migrant workers, unorganized sector, men, women, families, children, and the way in which now they are actually trying to keep body and soul together. I expect that there would be a need for large-scale food kitchens, so that can provide the equivalent of emergency food. The langars, which the gurdwaras have been doing in their own way, so have other religious institutions across the country. And this is where some kind of thought needs to be given. The government has spoken about releasing excess food stocks, distribution, and so on. And that the retired community, both Fauji and civilian, can perhaps be part of this effort as Sherpas, or, now that we are in this period of Ram Navami, I'm reminded of a story from the Ramayana, which I'm sure most people in India could relate to. They say that when Lord Ram was building the bridge to reach Sri Lanka, and he was being assisted by his monkey and bears and baboon army, a small squirrel came and said that it also wants to help. So the older monkeys and baboons led by Hanuman and Angad are supposed to be very disparaging of the squirrel. And Lord Rama tells them, no, the squirrel can also play a part. And he sends it off to wet its tail in the sea, and then take the wet tail and pick up little bits of granules of sand and deposit that on the bridge. So like that, I mean, the story goes that Lord Ram puts his hand on the shoulder of the squirrel, and that's why it has those 3 marks. That apart, I'm just saying that every citizen today can make an effort like the squirrel in this national challenge. And I hope the ex-servicemen would be able to provide their own experience and expertise to help the larger national cause. And we are going to come back to you for sure, Raman. Any last thoughts, please share on this platform of South Asia.
2 major points. Firstly, we need to encourage all religious institutions to chip in for food. Not only Gurdwaras, every religious institution has umpteen resources, umpteen funds. They need to be institutionalized to come forward with food service for the people. 1. Secondly, I foresee some law and order problem in the rural areas, particularly when the logistic trucks start moving and there is paucity of food items in the rural areas because of the distribution lag that we will have. The ex-servicemen can be used by the civil administration to ensure that discipline is maintained and we do not become a free-for-all land, because to reverse that trend will be a big task. It must not be allowed to set in. So we need to anticipate and we need to
take preemptive measures. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ramanji, thank you so much. As always, it's a great pleasure talking to you. On that note, let me thank Brigadier Ahluwalia, as I said, a veteran who has rich experience in aid to civil power and disaster relief. Hopefully, we will come back with other suggestions, but let me encourage all those who are watching this particular episode to please make your suggestions through this platform and share your experiences. Thank you for being with us. We'll come back with another episode of SAM Conversations.